Hey everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan and today we are continuing with our How to Build It Ford 302 series with part 6, putting on our cylinder heads and handling our oiling system. Before I go any further, I want to mention that we are sponsored by Summit Racing. They have been an absolutely incredible sponsor to deal with on this build and our LS build. This video series would not be happening without their tremendous support. They're not sending me any money, but they are sending me some fantastic parts, which all the links are located down below in the description. So make sure you buy all your speed parts from summitracing.com. So today's pretty exciting. We're going to be putting on our totally amazing AFR cylinder heads and finishing up our oiling system, putting in our oil pickup, our oil pump, and our oil pressure sender, as well as our oil pan. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump on in. So now we can move on to putting on our oil pump and pickup. Here's our oil pump sent over by Summit Racing. There's our part number. Link is down below in the description. Check that unit out. Pretty cool, performance application. A little bit more of higher oil pressure than stock, always nice. And we have some bolts to affix it. You want to use these bolts because they're quite a bit stronger than the stock ones, and to have one of these break on the oil pump and having it kind of drop or not have as much pressure would be disastrous for your engine. And then here is our pickup tube. Link down below in the description, made by Melling, again sent over by Summit. And that looks fantastic. So we can put this whole thing together. So with Fords, they need this, kind of thinner oil pump drive shaft. This is made by ARP, and we have a part number right there. Link is down below in the description. And we're going to use this as a tool to kind of prime our oil pump before we put it in. So what you want to do is take your oil pump drive shaft and always keep this clip facing towards the top. You can insert that into our oil pump and submerge it in some oil. And then we're just going to turn this counterclockwise until oil blubs up at the top, just like that. Our oil pump is primed. So out of our kit, we're going to go ahead and take this gasket here on the left side of your screen and install our oil pump with it. So on the engine, this is where your oil pump is going to mount, and that whole way down there is where our drive shaft is going to go, with our clip facing downward or upward if you're looking at the engine. So there we go. We want it to just sit right there, and then we can put the oil pump on top of it. So we can take our gasket and place that in its home. Perfect. And we're going to keep an eye on that as we're installing the pump. And it's going to be a little messy because of the oil. Lift that up, flip that over, and while you're doing this, grab the drive shaft, put it in its home on an oil pump, and then lower it down. Make sure your gasket's nice and lined up. It's a little difficult to see because of all the oil. That's all right. There we go. We're just gonna tighten those finger tight for right this moment. There we go. Perfect. All right, we're gonna tighten these down and go as evenly as you can. I know it's a little tedious because of its shape, but just go as evenly as you can. All right, so the torque spec we're gonna go with today is 25 foot-pounds. My torque wrench didn't go off yet. This is when we have to get a little creative on tightening. There we go. So we can install our pickup. I have our gasket right here. Put that on its stud over on the right. And we can put our gasket behind there. Do the top bolt. We're just going to put that in finger tight for right this moment. Or just start it rather. Swing the gasket into place. It's nice and lined up. And we can wind these bolts in. Grab our 3/8 socket. And we're just going to put these on finger tight. And don't do one all the way and then the other. Put them down as evenly as possible. And then I'm going to grab my small ratchet. And I'm just going to give these a wrist tight. I don't have a torque spec for you. If I find one, I'll leave it on screen, but wrist tight was probably fine. I'm going to come back and re-snug it down with a little bit bigger ratchet. There we go. Perfect. So now we can secure our oil pump sump, the washer, and the nut came with your ARP bolts. But I found this one. It even has an eye lock on the end of it. Pretty cool. And then we're going to grab 9/16 socket and just tighten it down. just one arm tight. Should be plenty. So now we can worry about putting our oil pan on. Now your oil pan is going to be specific to the model you're trying to put this engine into. If you have a Mustang, buy a Mustang pan, an F-150, and so on and so forth. We have an 81 Bronco that this engine's going back into, so we have that associated pan that Summit Racing sent over. There's our part number, link is down below in the description, and also our one-piece gasket. I've used these one-piece gaskets before in the past, and I really like them. I really like them as opposed to the four-piece, you know, kind of cork arrangement that you used to do kind of back in the olden days. This is a much better way to go. I like them, I prefer them, we're gonna use it. Again, sent over by Summit Racing, link down below in the description. To secure our oil pan, we have some awesome ARP bolts. Again, part number and link is down below in the description. So let's get started. All right, we're gonna take some of our best friend, RTV, apply some to our fingertip, and we're going to apply it right here on this corner. And then we're also gonna grab some RTV and put it right here where the timing cover meets the block, because this is typically where things, if they're gonna leak, are gonna leak. We can do that for both sides. Just a dab of RTV. There we go. You can even use the caulking applicator. Just put a dab of RTV in the corners, and then we're gonna do that on the back side as well. We can do the same treatment for the back. Just a dab. And then one over here, and now we're ready for our gasket. So before I put our gasket on, I want to mention that we've already cleaned the mating surface with some carburetor spray and a shop towel, and then we can line up our gasket on there. And it only goes on one way, so just pay attention to which bolt holes line up with what. I'm just going to make sure that gets nice and in its home, both grooves in the front and the rear. Like that. That looks amazing. So now we can gingerly put our pan on, and don't worry so much about our oil clearance because this is the stock pan and we use the stock pickup. If you're using some sort of aftermarket or some sort of cross application, you might want to measure that distance. Make sure all the holes are lined up, make sure the gasket hasn't moved or is not properly seated, but this one looks great. So on our kit, it came with two different size bolts. These are the same, and they came with four, so the big bolts go in the front and the rear, those four holes. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put those in first. So we're gonna do that to our front as well. So now what I'm gonna do is in a cross pattern, I'm just gonna start lowering down the pan. And the reason I'm doing it this way is to not deflect the pan so it doesn't warp. And then we'll do the sequence. And I'm just doing this finger tight, going cross to cross in an X pattern, doing as evenly as I can because we want this to be nice and square. Okay, that is perfect. It is nice and brought down nice and level with those big bolts. Now we can install our little bolts. So these are our little bolts. They are 12 point and they are 15/16. And we can just install those. We're just gonna put them in for right now and bring them down just a touch. We're just gonna make it so it's starting to get tight, but not quite. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So when you're reassembling anything, especially with these really nice ARPs, fasteners, pay attention to the washer they come with because it does have a beveled edge. You see that beveled edge? That beveled edge needs to go up to the head of the bolt. So always assemble your bolts and washers this way. So I've already put these down by hand, just to their, to touch, not very far at all. And on the small bolts, we're gonna go 9 foot-pounds, and on the bigger bolts, we're going to go 11. And the way we're going to tighten this is in a kind of a spiral pattern. So perfect, and then to the other side. Perfect. Perfect. There we go, and then across like this, and then over to the other side. Very cool. And then we're gonna up our torque wrench and we're gonna do the last 4 in this sequence from here to here and then to here to here. And we're going to change our socket from our 5/16 to 3/8. And then with our 3/8 12-point loaded, finish this pan off. There we go. Final one. Perfect. So with this nice and torqued down, what sometimes can happen is the gasket material can swedge out just a little bit. So go ahead and recheck them once again in about an hour or so. And when you're done tightening, this is kind of what you want to see. You want to see the RTV kind of oozing out of there. That means you have a really nice seal. So on most engines, there are coolant drain holes. Here's one of them. You can always tell by if you flash a light in there and you can actually see into the engine. Well, that's the water jacket and where coolant can come out, and you can use those to drain the engine of coolant. But since we don't want that, we need to plug it. And what you need is, I believe this is a 1/4-inch pipe plug. You can get this at your regular hardware store, and just install that with some pipe thread on there, some tape, until it's nice and snug. Don't really have a torque spec for you, just snug. You'll be able to feel it. That's perfect. So on the table in front of you is our brand new AFR heads sent over by Summit Racing. They are part number AFR-1387. Link down below in the description to these wonderful, magnificent heads. CNC'd machined aluminum. Honestly, you can't get much better than these awesome AFR heads. They're 72cc combustion chamber, which is quite a bit smaller than our stock units, and what that's going to do is lift our compression ratio up and give us more power. Also, check out the diameter of the valve right here compared to our brand new stainless steel ones. They are significantly larger, both intake and exhaust. That is going to give us a lot more power. So another important thing to look at, especially what might influence your decision to get aftermarket heads, typically aftermarket head makers are very aware of this problem. This is only if you're trying to reuse stock. So on an aftermarket head, you'll see the retainer, the distance between the retainer here and the valve stem seal right here at the end of my pointer is actually a pretty good distance. I'm not sure what that distance is offhand, but it is a lot bigger than stock. So on our cast iron stock unit here, you can see the distance for the retainer and the valve stem seal is actually not that much at all. It looks like it's about only a little over half of what our aftermarket unit is, and what that means is you're not going to get a lot of valve travel, which means you can't have an aggressive cam, because if you put an aggressive cam on something that has short valve travel, this is going to ram into your valve stem seal and cause all kinds of problems. So keep that in mind when you're picking heads. So I've put a spark plug in our spark plug well. I'm going to grab some water. Some people use gasoline. I much prefer water. This gasoline is dangerous and breathing it's no fun. And what we're going to do is fill up the combustion chamber with some water. And what we're doing here is we're looking for leaks. Fill it as far up as it'll go without spilling. That's good enough. And then you can sit and watch and see if there's any bubbles blooping up from the valves. And then you can look inside the intake runner and the exhaust runners and see if they have any water running down them, which we're going to do right now. So now we're on the intake runner and you can see down in there, look down in there, look deep, and look for any water. Look for any kind of leaks of any sort. The intake is really the important valve. The exhaust can leak a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. It's the intake you really want to be bone dry, which this is. So if you're reusing your old cylinder heads, you really should put a straight edge on the deck surface here and try to, get a 2/1000 feeler gauge underneath it and see if it's level or not. But since this is CNC'd perfectly right from AFR, I'm gonna go ahead and trust that this is perfectly flat. So we can go ahead and absorb our water here. And you want to do that for every combustion chamber just to make sure you don't got any leaks. Typically, you can trust it direct from the manufacturer on the leaks as well. I've seen countless people just take them right out of the box and slap them on and have no problems at all. So, with our head gaskets, we're going to go with our Fel-Pros. Here's our part number, link down below in the description. I've always used Fel-Pro and have had zero problems with them. Fantastic company. And to secure our heads to our block, we have this bolt kit from ARP. Now, these heads are a little special, and I'll show you why. In our bolt kit, you'll see it has these, and these are little inserts that go into the head, and you have to have these to use this particular cylinder head. If you don't have our particular AFR cylinder head, which I think you really should, they're amazing, then you can just get a regular bolt kit, and Summit has a lot of filters on their site to help you find those. So you have this little insert that goes into the head, and then the bolt goes into the insert. So it makes the bolt up here a little bit thicker, so the bolt is centered inside of the head, which the hole on the head is a little bit bigger in diameter for a little bit bigger bolt application. So I've cleaned this deck surface already with carburetor spray and a microfiber towel, and what we can do is grab our head gasket and pay attention to where it says front. See that right there? Front. So that goes to the front of the engine. So we put it on correctly, and now once it's slapped on, you want to go ahead and check and make sure there's no overhang on your head gasket. So you can see that there's block right here, and then our head gasket. So if this was inversed and our head gasket is intruding on our cylinder bore space, you need a bigger head gasket, but this is absolutely perfect. Alrighty, now if you have aluminum cylinder heads, this is really easy. We can just go ahead and drop that on, aiming for our dowels. So everything I've shown so far applies to both cylinder heads. They only make one cylinder head, and then it's the same on the other side. So everything I've done for this passenger side, do for the driver's side as well. Okay, so on our step washers here, we're gonna go ahead and put a little lubricant there under the head of it and on its body. Doesn't need a ton, just a bit. And we can just slip that into our cylinder heads and do that for all 10. There we go, now we're ready for some bolts. So on the underhead of every single bolt we're putting in this head, we're going to go ahead and lubricate under the head, just like this, underneath of it. That's absolutely perfect. And then on some of these bolts, we're gonna put RTV on the threads, and then other of the bolts we're gonna be putting on our assembly lube, and I'll go over each one of those. So on our short bolts, we're going to take some RTV and apply it to our threads because they go into water, and we don't want that leaking. Perfect, check that out. Lube underneath the head, RTV on the threads, and do that for all the short bolts, and that is these 5 down here. On the long bolts, we're gonna lubricate the whole thing. So I've got all 5 loaded on the shorties with the RTV on the threads and the lubricate under the head of the bolt. Now on the long ones, we do the same thing for under the head of the bolt, just like that, perfect. But on the threads, for the long ones, since they don't go into water, we're going to lubricate them with our ARP lube like this, and then we can just drop that in. And I'm not tightening it down, I'm just getting it like that, perfect, and we will torque those in just a moment. And we can do that for all 5 of these here. Okay, now that all 10 bolts are just brought down just a touch, they're not snug, they're not even at like 1 foot-pound, they're just, I've taken the slack out. So I've printed off this handy dandy piece of paper, and it shows exhaust, so it's gonna go like this. So our first bolt is going to be this one in the dead center, and we can just follow our guide along. And what we're going to do is do that in 3 stages. So our torque spec is 70 foot-pounds, but we're gonna go so we're gonna go 20, then 40, then 70, all in sequence. So let's get started. So we're gonna start with number 1 here, 20 foot-pounds, and then down to number 2, over to here to number 3, down to number 4, up here to number 5, down to number 6, then all the way over here to number 7, down here to number 8, back over here to number 9, then over to here for number 10. 20 is complete, now we can move on to 40 and just repeat our sequence 1 through 10 once again. Perfect, and I'm actually gonna trade up torque wrenches to 70 because 70 is kind of firm. So again, number one, 70 foot-pounds. You can see I've traded up to a larger torque wrench. Perfect, down to number two. There we go, number three. Number four. Number five. Oh yeah. Number six. There we go. Seven's over here. Eight's down below. 9 is over here. 10's below that. And there we go, our cylinder head is installed. Okay, so for our oil pressure sender, you might remember me removing kind of a long tube arrangement. And you can see this is what the sender looks like, sent over by Summit Racing, and it's really not possible to put it in there close to the block like you normally would. So what do you do? Well, you just go down to your local hardware store and get a 1/4 inch pipe tube with 1/4 inch thread and a fitting, and we can just put that right in once we've put some thread tape or pipe thread tape on there. Just get it started. Then we're going to grab an 11/16 socket. We're going to tighten that down. There we go. That looks awesome. So then we can put our oil pressure sender in. Don't forget to put pipe tape on that as well. Oh, you can almost get it all the way on by hand, but we're going to use a 9/16 wrench to just tighten it on there. Ooh, we're close. And just snug is fine. That is perfect. So when you're tightening your sender, never ever grab this part and try to tighten it on or use a pair of channel locks or something crazy like that. That's why they have the 9/16 nut on there. Always use a 9/16 wrench. So that's how to put a cylinder heads and your oiling system on a Ford 302 or 347 stroker in our case. It really doesn't matter so much on that it's a stroker compared to a 302 in this particular video. The stroke is nowhere near hitting the pan, and we even put a windage tray on, so that really doesn't matter. It's exactly the same as a regular 302. I hope I've earned your subscription here today on YouTube and maybe a thumbs up down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.